What's up, amigos? Commander Jaime, and I'm super excited today to have Evan to come onto the channel and cover a Victor premium deck profile. Evan, you want to say hi and maybe introduce yourself a little bit?
Hello, you people of YouTube. My name is Evan, aka Star Evan. Maybe you've seen me online, ye old Machinima community. I'm on Twitch as well. But I've been playing this game, God knows how long. Japanese BTO3, the original BTO3.
Oh,
so
wow.
I've been in this game for ages upon ages.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here, do a deck profile, even if it's not like a topping one. I got close a couple times this season, so excited to share this with you guys.
Yeah, thank you for joining the channel. That's gonna be one of my questions too at the very with like what's holding back Victor, you know. But yeah, first like the deck profile. But one of the things that I want to say about Evan too, he's a phenomenal player. We actually met in one of the bros virtually, and we had a good game. And then the next year we participated in BCS 2022, and he was the person that I lost to that day. And he was playing Regalia, and so he had double Honolly with Divine Gauges on those bad boys. I could not do anything with Ripples once you got to that point.
Yeah, tier 0 Ripple had nothing on double Honolly at that point.
So you were ready for that.
Yeah, I was completely ready. I dealt with your deck in mind.
And what's really cool too is that we saw each other this past BCS season, and he was playing Victor, and so he was the first person that came to mind as soon as somebody in the comments actually had recently asked about it, and so that's why I wanted to bring him to the channel. And so let's start diving into the actual deck.
All right.
So feel free to take the reins, Evan.
Okay. I guess my quick commentary before we begin is just that kind of going into the events this year, the big reason I picked Victor was looking at it, at least at the start of the season. We were looking at kind of a square format, as I kind of like to call it, where it was Naru, Gridora, Chaos, and Melista, even though Melista at the very start wasn't that popular. A lot of people thought, oh, this deck's kind of a gimmick. It's not going to do a whole lot. But I felt that looking at this deck in that square kind of format, this was the best pick indirectly of the format, because this deck, in theory, matched well against everything out of those four. It has basically 100-0 against Gridora. It does really well against Chaos, because even if you unlock your stuff, you don't technically unlock, so Chaos Breaker never triggers. You rush early enough to where Melista doesn't ever get the proc. Like, in theory, like you just kill them before they get to set up and do their loop. Aru is the hard matchup out of those four, where you're technically flipping a coin every single time you do it. If you go first, you in theory win. If they go first, they in theory win. So it's like, you know what, if I'm beating 3 out of the 4 and have a coin flip against the other, I felt this was the best deck. Plus the format is and was at the time still so wide, like you had to consider coverage in that format. And I felt that, you know what, if I'm going against something I don't know well enough, this deck can do well against everything in theory by just killing them.
Totally agree. Makes a lot of sense.
So I guess going over the cards card by card, some people will find 4 copies of original Extreme Battler Victor a little bit weird. Some people have gone like more towards the V Victor, maybe like a split of 2 and 2 or 1 and 3. I felt that 4 was the correct call going into the format. Oddly, on the fact that you don't want to generate a ton of Excel markers in certain matchups. Specifically against Chaos and Narukami. If you go like second against Naru, you give them 2 more Excel circles, they start sniping your units. That's just a ton of power that they're getting unnecessarily. And I've had Naru players where they just kind of sat there like, oh, I'm getting plus, like we're getting power off 1 circle. I'm not doing anything with just that little bit of power, where like you just sit on Zubat instead during Naru matchups. And then against Chaos, it's like, oh, if I can unlock mid battle phase, I snipe 2 of your attackers. Like, you're putting on those Excel markers by just retiring them. Meanwhile, Victor himself still does give you like extra power. It still gives you the extra swing. Plus, we're not playing as high of an Extreme Battler count. I think depending on format changes, you could go a little bit higher on that Extreme Battler count to justify V Victor a little more. But I felt that original Extreme was the best one to go for in the current format.
Yeah, it's a good point, because even the V series, Victor has kind of a dependency of the name, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can get away from that and then not have to worry so much about the Excel circles, because if I were to ask you a question, if you were going second or first, would you pretty much 9 times out of 10 go into Vic 10 regardless?
You typically go into Vic 10 almost all the time as first stride. Like, it's either Vic 10 or Bustard, which I'll talk about a little bit more later. I have some controversy about Bustard that might seem like a hot take, but
okay, we'll get to that once we get to that.
We'll get to that when we get to the G zone. But ultimately, like, even Vic 10 is just good, like as a vanilla strat. Like, if you like don't go for the burst, where it's like, all right, I'm just going to stride a vanilla Vic 10 swing. Vic 10 is a stride comparable to Meteor Kaiser Victor, which is a GB3 stride. And we get that just on a vanilla swing now. And I feel that was like one of the best rides we've had for the longest time in this entire clan. So Vic 10 just getting like the indirect buffs, like all of the indirect buffs, I felt has just mattered on that card.
Makes a lot of sense. Plus you get double Excel Circle at that point. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's even like just doing Vic 10 again is never a bad play.
And just do it again next turn. Yeah, I gotcha.
And then I played the Zubat. Zubat and Ultimate Lifeform Cosmolord are also kind of like mixed ratios that I've seen a lot of people go for. Some people go higher on Ultimate Lifeform. Some people play like just 1 to 2 Zubats. Some people only play the 6 grade 3. Some people only play 4 or 8, excuse me, with Extreme and then the Heal Guardians. I felt that going 7 grade 3s is usually my ideal ratio in this deck in particular, because I like to re-ride every single turn I possibly can. The 1 extra soul does matter because it makes Spiral Breaker more consistent, it makes Gun more consistent, it makes Scarlet Bird more consistent.
Yeah.
Plus, Zubat is also the better ride against Naru. Ideally, like if you are going first and you can afford to go Vic 10, because that's how you win in the Naru matchup. You go Extreme Ballot Victor, Stride Vic 10. You do make the double Excel Circle at that point. Try and burst down their hand as much as they can so they can't retaliate. And then after that, you try and rewrite into Zubat, which we are playing the 4 Rashid to try and dig into the 1 Zubat or just see the original Extreme.
Yeah.
Plus, this is really good against Mega Colony 2. It gives you resources, so if they try and like counterblast your own stuff, if they're on V or G Ghidorah, excuse me, you start on countercharging yourself, you start building yourself soul. But it is also like, you don't want to see it too early, and you never really want to rewrite Zubat on top of Zubat in a lot of cases, just because the second Zubat doesn't do a whole lot, and that's why I felt that Cosmolord was the better card for the last 2 slots in the grade 3 ratio if we're going with the 7 theory. Cosmolord is, I lost count how many times throughout the season I would just put this guy in an Excel Circle, rest 2, call Scarlet Bird, restand the board, start swinging with Cosmolord with like multiple triggers, and he's like swinging 42 on his own.
Man, that is a beefy restander.
And he's swinging like 3 times at that point, so it's like you're not living 42 3 times in a row.
Man, that is rough for like the opponent.
Yeah, like they just don't live. Plus, it's really nice to like give you like a mini in-deck engine between Cosmolord, Jack, and Scarlet Bird, where it's like you have like your own abilities to rest your own cards and then restand them off the Scarlet Bird. Scarlet Bird also giving you draw power, and Scarlet Bird is actually the reason, unironically, I considered Victor for this entire season. Yeah,
I noticed that like I've seen this card a few times before, but like I've seen like TIE Fighter's video recently, he went more of the G build, and he wasn't playing this to my knowledge too. I think once you get to it, you'll explain a little more too.
Yeah, like Scarlet Bird, I think was a way to round out the deck and also like be one of the tech slots, which we'll talk about. Like there is some flex room in this deck, like as I'm sure you'll see that there's like a couple cards that aren't standard and like, well, I don't like this, or maybe I think this isn't like good depending on the format I'm playing in. Because obviously, if you're not playing against like the I guess now a triangle format, because we don't have Nilista anymore, you have some flex spots within the deck to be able to just tinker around with.
Gotcha.
So Jack is another controversial card, I guess, if we want to get into like some of the spicy stuff. Some people are like, this should be Hank, this should be DOS Sledge. People might say, oh, it should be this or it should be this. I liked Jack for the immediacy of power, because I feel that just that line that says Vanguard, Rearguard, during your turn, this unit gets plus 10k. 19 just on its own is really good. 24 on an Excel Circle is really good when you do get to those points.
Yep.
And plus, the fact that you can just rest 2 to restand himself, because he doesn't restand during stand phase like everything else does in this deck. So it gives you like some main phase action, which is good for some of your strides. Merciless Dragon. This card is just honestly really good. I liked it a lot throughout the entire season. And it is like, I feel, the immediate big beater that you want. People will say that there's like theory between you should play this similar to Aqua Force, where you just play a bunch of cards that can like restand each other and then play it that way. My argument to that is, why not just play Aqua Force at that point, you know? Like, have you read, is it Swell Assault, the guy that like gets like 5k for every additional rearguard circle you have?
Yeah, Pursuit Assault, yeah.
Or Pursuit Assault, yeah, excuse me. Like, I'm just like, I would rather play Pursuit Assault than Jack if I absolutely could. Like, I would love to play that card, but we don't get that card. And it's like, if you're just going to play, it's like everything can just restand itself. Just play Aqua Force at that point. I like to make a lot of jokes like where it's like, oh, between Nova Grappler or Aqua Force, which one got the more recent support? That claim is probably the better one. And that's how I felt.
They often get compared.
Yeah, like they're very like similar, but they do have their differences. Obviously, like I know like they're not like blanket copies of each other, but I feel that there are enough similarities where it's like, if you're playing one way or one the other way, maybe look at the other clans, see if you can get more of what you want out of that. Yeah.
I gotcha. Fair enough. So that helps with Brutal Jack too.
Yeah. And plus, again, the Scarlet Bird, which we'll talk about some of the synergies between all of that.
Okay.
And then Gulsachi, I don't understand why people are playing like 3 of this card or even 2 in very rare cases. I think this is one of the best grade 2s in the entire clan right now. Just that word of resist is important right now.
It is.
Like, plus he's hitting 16 on his own, which isn't or doesn't sound like the best number. But when you consider that a lot of decks are playing 11Ks again, 16 is a decent number once again.
Yeah.
And against Naru, like, even if you have like a front row of double Gulsachi, they just kind of sit there like, oh, I'm not playing the game anymore this turn. They do not play when you have double Gulsachi on board. And then our other restander of choice is the Spiral Breaker. This card, I think, was also a saving grace for the clan. One of the other reasons, like this and, like I said, Scarlet Bird earlier, are probably the 2 cards that made me really consider this clan like competitively. Because this is a card that lets you play around CB denial. And people are just surprised when you can do so much with 1 CB in this deck. Like, you really just need the 1. Sure, Gulsachi's a little bit weaker, but it doesn't matter. You just treat Gulsachi at that point like it's your big beater that you're standing over and over again.
That makes a lot of sense, too, because, like, the thing that could stop Novas is sometimes Hanali. And, like, you have, like, all these counterblast skills on top of that. It can contradict with your plays.
Yeah.
But with your skills being like Soul Blast 1 or whatever it may be, how do you feel like with dealing with Hanali at this point, since you only need like maybe 1 CB like you mentioned?
So when I was building this deck, I wanted, because obviously Hanali just got the buff around the point that we started, like Albert and I started working on this deck a little bit together. Albert of WCC, for people who may not know or recognize the name immediately. We felt that there were just so many good cards in Novas that it could play without needing a counterblast. It's like, why are we scared of Hanali? And we just built the deck with the mentality of not being scared of Hanali. And the deck wasn't scared of Hanali. I got messed up by Hanali once the entire season at Houston against Riviere because, like, he just kept drawing like 3 cards a turn, and I never saw him draw Hanali, so I didn't even know he had it at that point. So I was playing against an unknown threat. I was at 5 damage, and then he just like Citrons into the, I think it's Citron, the one that calls Hanali, yeah. And I'm just like, oh, I tapped out because I thought I could kill you this turn. And I did play a slightly different list at Houston compared to this one, which is a little more CB heavy. But because I played the CB heavier build, that's actually what costed me in that matchup, where it's like, if I didn't play that CB heavier build, I could have just killed him at that point.
Yeah.
So I feel that between like Spiral Breaker, because you only like really counterblast between Gulsachi, the Victors, and Ultimate Lifeform Cosmo Lord, and then some of your G units, but you also have G units that just don't counterblast at all, or are just literally free. So I felt that maxing between Spiral Breaker and Gulsachi were like the best multi-attackers. I did consider Hank as well. Hank almost made it into this list, but space was just so tight. Plus, I felt that Hank was like the 3rd best restander between the 2 that I already played. So I felt that it was just like a little unnecessary. Plus, if I was going to play an additional grade 2, I'd really want to play Arnest himself and another unit, draw a card, and then Soul Blast 1, retire him to restand something. You can do some really cool plays with that card. Yeah. But it just, space was so tight. I was like struggling to fit everything I wanted to in.
No, it's a card I know that TIE Fighter was playing in his build too, just to make things happen too. So there's some flexibility in plays with other card choices too.
Yeah, like Arnis does like almost the exact same thing also between Jack and Cosmo Lord, where it's like you are getting those main phase rests, which does trigger certain strikes. Again, Merciless Dragon primarily. Yeah. Or, now that we can talk about Scarlet Bird, the card of the format. So when Mega Colony was starting to pop off everywhere, Scarlet Bird just says Soul Blast 1, stand all of your units. That includes your Vanguard.
Wow. I just realized that. Wow.
So if they're just saying, hey, you're not sending your Vanguard or you can't re-ride, you just call this card a rearguard circle. And it's like, oh, well, it's okay, so it's really a blowout against Mega Colony, but what about other matchups? That's where Cosmo Lord and Jack come in. They rest stuff in main phase in order to help you trigger the Scarlet Bird, so then you still get the draw off the Scarlet Bird. Yeah. You can also do really funny stuff with Gunsden, where it's like you rest it for the resist skill, give 5 units resist, call Scarlet Bird, restand it. Suddenly, Gunsden's a really huge unit. Yeah. Because you can treat Gunsden similar to a beater while also being a resist protector. If you really have to do some weird plays with Jack, you can restand the Jack. Like maybe you just don't have like enough units to call to like efficiently rest it. There's a lot you can do. Plus, also this plays really well against the original Dark Face, where it's like you call like a Gulsachi or a Spiral Breaker or a Jack, like, oh, I'm going to Soul Blast 2 rest that. I'm gonna call this Soul Blast one and restand it. So you just have so many ways to play around like different aspects of the like Mega Colony in specific. It's why this card I think literally lets you 100-0 Redora almost every time. And I remember when I was telling Albert like, hey, I'm thinking of playing Scarlet Bird. He's like, you're cooking this format, and I love it.
Yeah, I know. Like that really hurts Mega Colony like a lot. Like they can only do so much. Wow.
Yeah, like you can just blow them out of resources, and like you can even tell them like off their G Gardens, like, hey, if you don't rest to draw cards, you can just tell them to draw cards, and you do not care. You will blow them out of the water just with the natural flow of this deck.
Wow.
So yeah, like it gives you an 8-card engine. It digs you in. It gives you multi-attacks, big beaters. It does what the deck I feel like wanted to do. However, I do feel that if Mega Colony phases out, Scarlet Bird is definitely a card that can come out of the deck, and you can start playing some of the more G era cards that are also really good. Like I'm not playing Malayaki, I'm not playing Gunstead. I'll talk about that when we get to Rollick in a little bit, but those were conscientious decisions that I chose not to play those cards in this list.
Gotcha. Sounds good.
Gumbarugon was a card I really wanted to play 3 of, and I did play 3 of it in Houston. I love this card. It's just basically, this is my substitute for not playing Hank, more or less, or not beginning to play more Spiral Breakers. It's just a 13k beater because it gives himself the plus 5k that also restands something. This is another way that you get to play around Honolulu because it's another Soul Blast restander. We're playing like 11, 10. So, and plus it's also a 10k shield because you do have a lot of G area units that don't have a ton of shield.
Yeah.
Which that's one big weakness of Victor. I hate to admit it. Nova Grapplers as a clan did not get a lot of good cards in the V era. We had the cards that we did get that are good are insane for the deck, but the ones that like are kind of middling, just, you know, they're not like super great. Like Riser Custom, which is a set 1 card in V era, was one of the best ones we unironically got. But the fact that I'm saying that from set 1 kind of says how little we actually got.
Later on. I gotcha.
And then Rollick, the not popular choice, and I know this is where people are going to be like, why are you playing this card?
I'm interested too.
So this deck doesn't have Ride Down, so that doesn't make sense. And obviously you're a combo deck, so in theory you want a bunch of pieces, so why are you playing a card that's not a piece? This card in theory acts as a substitute for you having to use pieces to guard. Because going second in a lot of matchups is just so rough for you, like I mentioned, the Naru matchup is almost unwinnable like if you go second. Despite me almost decking out Narukami in Chicago, which I think was super funny, but they decked me out instead. And this card just gives you a game plan for going second, because I feel like that's just what the problem is. Like one of the big problems is with this deck. Going second is really rough if they get the superior stride on you. You don't, in theory, need more combo pieces when everything else in the deck is a piece in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
Like Gunsden is a beater, Gumbarugon is a restander, Spiral Breaker and Gosachi are restanders, Jack's a beater, Cosmolord's a beater, the Victors are what enable multi-attacks. So in theory, like you could argue this could be Malayaki to give power. In Chicago, I told everybody that Malayaki was the worst card in my entire deck. I don't think it's bad for context, and I think it's really good against like any rogue matchup, because, and to be fair, this format's wide, like I've said before. So Malayaki could be in the slot. This is one of the flex slots I feel you can tinker with if you really want to. But I felt that going Rollock was the best call just because going second is so rough. I feel that if I was to play in Worlds, which unfortunately I didn't qualify this year, but if I was going to Worlds, this is currently the list I would be looking at.
Yeah, the thing with Novas too that I've noticed is that their early game is not so great compared to others. And it's really your turn 3, but ideally turn 4 is when you start becoming very scary to your opponent. So if you can find ways to basically survive to that point, then that's super value for you. And I can see why you value Rollocks in this case. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, and plus, I guess another point is that like people might say, oh, it's just not a unit you can call. If you reach a point like mid to late game where you just need a booster for Spiral Breaker because he needs a booster, you can just call the Rollock and then not feel bad about it. If they kill it, congratulations, you killed my 7k vanilla.
Yeah, that's it. 10k shield, worst case scenario. Yep. Yeah,
10k shield, worst case vanilla, but it's basically a vanilla at that point. It's like, you know, I can just freely call this because it's also technically one of the better slots to call. Yeah, like if you want to play Malayaki or Jarahawk, which Jarahawk was the card that unironically costed me at Houston against Riviere, because I was originally playing, instead of the Rolex, I was playing a 3rd Gumbarugon and 2 Jarahawk. You reach weird points where it's like, oh, Zubat doesn't get to trigger because you have the 1 extra soul, even though it's like, you get to trigger the counter charge because of it, but you don't get to trigger the soul charge, so you don't get the draw. And it also plays worse into Hanali. So, plus, because it's a back row unit, Chaos Breaker can do some funny plays where they just snipe it out.
Yep.
I felt that it was just kind of the weakest card in my deck. Plus, it's also a 5k shield, and I didn't like that. And again, just the Hanali logic of I don't want to play into Hanali as much as I can.
Right. I got you.
And then the rest of this is relatively simple. 2 Gunsden. You can also play 3 of this. Again, just alternate between like the Scarlet Birds or the Rawlux, but this is probably one of the best cards against Narukami. I'm so excited when we get the grade 3 Regalis Piece and Triple Drive Booster. I think that card's just an automatic shoe-in because it's basically like a 3rd Gunsden without having to play a 3rd Gunsden, while also giving you Soul and replacing itself. So I think that card just naturally flows super well in this deck, but Gunsden is really good. It's alternative, really big beater. It's a main phase rester. I think this card is phenomenal. You don't play a ton of it just because it's, again, the 5k shield, and you don't want to see it all the time because it does nothing on its own. It needs other cards to work.
Gotcha. Yeah, you don't even play a Forbidal, so then that new Regalis Piece can be a good addition for your deck, too.
Yeah, I did consider Forbidal, but I felt like that was just bumping the grade 3s up too high, and I had to find like one more grade 3 to kind of justify it. Because I don't really want to call a Victor, and it's like, sure, it's cute to call another Cosmo Lord, but I feel at that point I might as well just play the 3rd Cosmo Lord if I was going to go that route.
Right. It's almost like another copy anyway, so you might as well play the card.
Yeah.
I gotcha.
And then for Arashid, some people will play the V-era Arashid for the Czech top 5. I just want to see Extreme Valor Victor as consistently as I can. You're also not playing like 4 Heal Guardians. It's, again, kind of similar to Rawlux, where it's like if you just need to call something, you can. This is a really good early game card to rush because if they kill it, it's low value for them.
Yep.
It's also stride fodder because obviously we want to stride every single turn. We're not a deck that's privileged with a ton of good grade 3s, so this is a card that just gets you there. I feel like it's pretty standard to play this card, just maybe not at 4, but...
Yeah, what's cool too about those stride enablers or stride fodders, like you can reveal the grade 3 heals and you can just search what you need to as well. So there's some flexibility even more so.
Yeah, I did that a lot at Houston, too. I kept drawing these things like it was my job, and then I was like, oh, I need to see this Extreme Battler really badly.
Yep, perfect.
And then White Tiger as a starter. You do specifically play White Tiger because you need the name for Scarlet Bird in order to trigger the draw effects, so usually you'll see people play like Blau Junger or something like here. You can really play whatever starter you want, but if you're playing Scarlet Bird, you do play the White Tiger.
Yeah, you need the name. I got you.
Yeah, and then Break Pass, the Victor crit. We all know what these do at this point. They're draws and defensives, good crits on offense. You play the Victor name, so it's not like it's a detriment. This card is so good. It's also a good early game card if you just need to rush or just call a booster. This is Break Passes, or not Break Pass, Spiral Breaker's best friend.
Yep.
And then for Keaton Pecan, our stride crit, same logic as a Rashid. We want to stride every single turn. We're playing as many ways to do that as we can.
Yep.
3 draw PGs and then the Sanctitude, which I'll get to in a little bit. I almost wanted to change the PG ratio a little bit. I wanted to play at least 1 copy of Extreme Battler Baryon, which is the grade 1 Victor PG that you can only PG with it if you have a Victor Vanguard, but it has a skill that you can counterblast 1 and draw a card.
Yeah. I remember.
So you do have some funny ways to replenish your hand mid-battle phase, but I felt that, as Albert convinced me, and it did happen in Chicago, I was going to run into DP at least once, and Sanctitude is just too good at that point, and I felt that I couldn't justify playing the extra grade 1 PG, so I just went with a 3 Twin Blader and then 1 Sanctitude.
Yeah, and the Sanctitude is also a Blitz Order, so it's good against the Nubatama matchup.
It's good against Nuba, it's good against OTT. It is a good card, and I just wanted to play the Baryon, but I really couldn't justify it as much as I wanted to.
No, I definitely understand. It was a solid choice.
Yeah, and then 1 Edelbreath.
Yep.
Brankit has like the best OT. I don't agree with any one of the others. I think that red OT is very funny, but I feel like just blowing people out of the water, especially on cards like Bustard or Merciless, you can just kill people. Or if you just even do this with Cosmo Lord, and it's you're swinging for 30 something over and over again with 3 crit, you're just blowing them up.
Yeah.
And then the heal triggers, I did go with the Blau heal, which I'm going to give a shout out to Albert on this one, because we were talking about these resource heals coming back in the format, and he's like, I do feel like it's justifiable in a lot of decks to play 1 to 2 of these again.
Yeah.
Even though a lot of decks are faster, They're 10k again. The resource in some decks does matter. And plus this heal trigger lets you do some really funny things where you can like just soul charge 2, draw 3 cards on your opponent's turn. For no CB, by the way, because you just generate all the CB back because of this card.
Yeah, that makes sense. With the G-Guard plays too. Yep.
Yeah. And then Heal Guardian, it's a grade 3. It's really good. I do like a lot of this. I almost considered going 2-2, but I felt I was just so afraid of Naru that this is better value against Naru. So
yeah.
And Naru
is what survive going second. Yeah.
So that's it for the main deck at least, and I guess we'll hop into the G zone unless you have any comments you want to make or ask real quick.
You've answered a good amount. I think we'll have more questions in the G zone too.
Okay. So for the G zone, this is not the most standard. I know some people are going to comment that there's not some cards in this G zone, which I'll get to in a bit. But first off is Vic 10. I think one of the best strides now in the entire deck. This card is the equivalent of Medio Kaiser Victor, which is a GB3 originally for the deck. Yep. But it's like your best stride going first, arguably, depending on the matchup. But you'll usually go into this going first. And to a point where it's like you will do this 2 turns in a row a lot of times. And like it's just a stride you can go into without needing to like pay a cost, which sometimes just does happen. Originally in Chicago, I was only playing 2 and I played the Progenitor Dragon.
Oh, yeah.
Which I like the idea of the Progenitor because it lets you play around in late game where if you're putting like damage checks like OT or some other trigger, you get to play around that by just reducing their power to 0. But it never came up, unfortunately. And I felt like it was just like a little too cost heavy because you have to CB2 effectively to use it. Because CB1 for the skill, CB1 for Extreme Battler. And obviously we're trying to avoid CBing as much as we can to play around Honolulu and such. So yeah. Plus, I was unfortunate, just never saw 2 copies of Extreme Value Victor at the same time, but, you know, we have that sometimes.
Yeah, just be able to Ultimate Stride or the Progenitor Stride cost, yep.
Yeah, so for that reason, I just went triple Vec 10, and I felt that it was great. It was wonderful in Houston, and I definitely recommend it.
Cool.
I'll go over G-Guards in a little bit, I guess. I'll just go over strides.
Yeah, that's fine.
Another stride that Albert and I were going crazy over and why we felt this deck was really good was Merciless Dragon. Yeah. So Merciless, for people who don't know what this does, you get when a Rearguard just stands by an ability, this can be either main phase or battle phase. You CB1, discard 2, restand him, swing with him at the Vanguard, and then he just gets drag -1 at the end of the attack. You can just trigger this multiple times in main phase.
Yes.
So your opponent like has to start preemptively guarding before you start actually swinging with your board.
Yeah.
And
is that a way too that can also bait out some G Guardians or disruptive plays too? They're in that main
yeah, so what you can do is like say, kind of going back to the main deck for a second, be like, all right, call Cosmo Lord, rest like 2 random units, call Scarlet Bird to restand those same rear guards you just rested, draw a card, trigger Merciless Dragon's like main phase skill, swing with it before battle phase, and then you can like call like another Scarlet Bird to restand it again later. Like Scarlet Bird lets Merciless Dragon keep triggering. I just want to like
hilarious.
So you can just like keep triggering this card over and over again. You can trigger in mid battle phase too. Yeah. Like and again, that exact same scenario. Like swing Cosmo Lord. Don't use the restand or use the skill to restand itself. Merciless triggers because it recognizes that a rearguard restood. So Merciless restands himself, swings again, and then you can use Extreme Battler's skill to restand something. Oh look, mid swing I restood something. Restand again. Like you can just keep triggering this card over and over again a ridiculous number of times.
It's very scary too once you get triggers that like just make this like with crit or even just like the OT.
Yeah, exactly. And also this card is why I don't play any of the Victor strides because I feel this card is just better than Favorite Champ Victor or Winning Champ. I always get the 2 mixed up in the middle. I just realized
that. Yeah, you're not playing that.
I'm not playing any of those strides as weird as it sounds, but it's because I feel that every other stride in the clan in theory does what those cards do better. Like Vic 10 is better Medio Kaiser Victor. Yeah, I feel like Merciless is better than Favorite Champ Victor, and then Bastard is typically better than going into Winning Champ Victor because they do similar things, not quite the same, but like you get to play around them in better resource management. Because Favorite Champ Victor, like just being the CB2, and then sure you get the counter charge 1, but it's board dependent, like so board dependent. Whereas Merciless lets you like, all right, if I'm swinging in main phase and you start disrupting my board with like Bulwarks or like, you know, whatever other disruptive G Guardians are on the format, because there's a ton now, especially after the latest premium collection, Merciless lets you play around that a lot better. I still only play the 1 because it's technically like your really big burst turn where it's so heavy on CB, so heavy on resources, you're not doing it a second time, but you in theory could play a second of this card.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense too, because like you're still in the main phase, so you can still like recuperate from like disruptive plays.
Yeah, and then continue, and, like, you can readjust your board as needed. You can do a lot with Merciless.
No, definitely agree with that. That's very smart of you guys.
And then as the bulk, which this is a weird one. A lot of people don't like this card unless you're playing the V Victor.
Yeah.
However, in cases where you need your Vanguard to be big, because none of your Vanguard strides like really give themselves power. This is the only stride that gives itself power.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Because you get 5k for every like rearguard that restood by his effect. So it's like, sure, you're swinging with a bunch of weenies, but your Vanguard gets really big. And against Neo Nectar, if they do like the Rain Breath on Terrano play, they suddenly jump up in power, so you're still able to hit over in a lot of cases.
Oh yeah, that makes sense too. Yep.
So this card's really good in my opinion. Plus, it's also like a free flip if you need to just randomly flip something for GD8. So yeah. I think as the bulk is really good. It's the one of, but you still want to play this card in my opinion.
Makes sense.
And then Bustard, our controversial card.
Sure.
So when Albert and I were looking at the very start of this format, we noticed that a lot of people were trying to like cook with Victor, but we did not like how a lot of people were cooking with this deck because everybody was trying to play Bustard Turbo. I feel that's incorrect. You go into Bustard, in my opinion, almost every single game. Like if you're going second, this is, in my opinion, the best stride because like you just get to drive check 5 cards. But there would be a lot of times where I would just like swing for the 5 drives and I would not restand. And my opponent would just be like, what are you doing? Just only like penta driving and not restanding. Why are you not swinging again? I'm like, well, I just got 5 combo pieces. Good luck killing me next turn. Because I can afford to like unload damage, like take a bunch of hits. Because you can just like go up to 5 damage in this deck. And it's like, cool, I'm low committal. You maybe swing with 2 resources, put me at 5. I'm killing you next turn. Have fun flipping a 6 damage heal. Like, I just use this card to fish for pieces. And you can do that with G's on a lot in this deck. Just fish for cards and be like, all right, I sculpted my hand to where I want it. Now I can kill you.
Got it. So if I were to summarize what you said, a lot of people were basically trying to maximize aggressively with this turn. Yeah. But for you, you use it as a way to like sculpt your hand for the following turn where you really just put the nail in the coffin.
Exactly. Like you can kill on Buster. Like if you flip OT, yeah, I'm absolutely restanding this baby, but
right.
Like, and because we're not playing Jarahawk, this card's a little bit weaker. But at the same time, because we are playing Scarlet Bird, since this doesn't care when a unit restands, you can also trigger Buster, like just getting the multiple drives in main phase if you need to.
Yeah.
Like maybe like they disrupt like some of your calls, you can still trigger like some of that in some ways.
Wow, that's really good.
And then the old win condition of the deck, the GB8, we probably have the best GB8 in the game, realistically.
So good.
This card is so good. This used to just be the win con. I didn't go into it all the entire season, but I was like, oh, I almost can. Like it comes up though, it realistically does. Like you just restand everything. Everything swings twice.
Yeah.
Because he gives red text, by the way, for people who don't know how this card works. He gives a skill that just on rest restand it, and then he gets 5k
from nothing.
Yeah, it's a little anti-synergetic with Extreme Battler Victor, but you know what? We're still taking that regardless. If you can ride to Zubat, it's also really good because you can give something else that skill a second time that when the unit rests, restand it. So.
Oh wow, yeah, that's true.
So Zubat is technically the better one, just as a minor note on that. But you can do really funny plays with this card.
I was gonna say when the GB8s come out, Nova definitely beat Aquaforce in this.
That was definitely a time where we won, absolutely. And then Harmonix Messiah because you have to play it.
Yeah,
obviously it's your license to play the premium. And then Meteor Kaiser Victoplasma, the card nobody played this format except me. A lot of people do not like this card and say this is a worst favorite champ Victor. Why are you playing this? This is technically a 2-parter. One is similar to Bustard, where it's like I just need a stride to go into to like try and resculpt the hand because it's like you get quad drive. You pitch 2, you drive 2, pitch 2, drive 2 again. So you get to flex out like a couple cards. But also one thing that I love about this card is that if a game state is not going optimally for you, you can go into the Victoplasma without any condition to restand a second rear guard and just swing with it twice.
Yeah.
Like this is the only stride in the clan that just does that. It has no condition for your board. It's just I swing and that's all it does. And I thought that was better than going into something like Favorite Champ where it's like you're spending so many resources and you need board committal. Where if you don't want to board committal or subpar board committal, you can just go into this and then be fine.
Yeah, it's basically in those niche case scenarios where like you just rely on this worst case scenario.
Yeah, like it's not the best strat, but it's a very solid strat in my opinion. Plus, you can afford if you can afford a CB2 for like favorite champ, you can afford a CB2 for Medio Kaiser Victor or Victor Puzzle.
Yeah.
So I felt that this was the way to go.
Yeah, I remember back in the day where I think people played like the 4 copies and you can do the skill twice.
You
like
could do that. I did consider like playing a third copy because of the rule change, but I did feel it was a little bit heavy. Yeah, and I was like, I'm not wanting to CB4 for all that.
Yeah, what rule change did you mean?
It's they changed how like some once per turn or like some of the costs work. It's similar to like the Overlord strat. I'm forgetting the name of it. The one Dragonic Overlord strat. It does the same thing. Yeah, it's the exact same ruling on that. So yeah, you can trigger the skill twice to where it's like you meet the GB3 condition. Well, it's quote unquote GB3 condition.
Right. That's what I meant too. Yeah, that's why you play extras, but it's so cost heavy.
Yeah. So I did consider. I almost did it, but I just felt I didn't have the space. It almost came in over the third Vic 10, but I felt the third Vic 10 was just a better card overall.
Makes sense. Yep.
And then onto the G Guardians. Dismal, pretty self-explanatory. We're just trying to protect our board where we can. Golsachi is like the best rear guard, so we want to protect it whenever it's necessary to. A Dogon Titan, the former best G Guardian in my opinion. I still think this card is really good. It's free 25k shield. It's an unblocker technically. Yeah. Countercharger, undeleter, because I played against the leader Chicago last year, and I was like, there's no way.
Wow, what are the odds?
So I'm like, you know what? And plus I do owe this card my top back in Galaxy Stargate format because I played against the leaders and I just kept undeleting myself every turn. He's like, well, I guess I can't do anything if you keep doing that.
Yeah, basically.
So Dogon Titan's really good. I know Aquaforce players love like their own version of this card.
Guphilia, yeah.
Yeah, Guphilia. Gundreed, the really funny card, and this card is so many mind games in one card. So this card gets no shield, but it gives your Vanguard a red text skill that at the end of the battle this unit was attacked. If it doesn't hit, you countercharge.
Yeah.
This is really funny in my opinion, where people will be like, all right, I'm going to start swinging sides, and that's fine with them. Or they think like, oh, I have to start swinging at Vanguard in order to make them drop their hand so they get value out of this G Guardian to start countercharging. I would just go into this, tell people no guard every time they swing at my Vanguard, and I'm indirectly countercharging by just going up in damage. You're not denying me anymore. You're giving me still the same result either way.
Oh, because you could get a damage trigger, basically.
Not even like just on the prospect of a damage trigger, but because like you're like, say you were at like two or three damage and you go into this. Maybe you have like one face up already because of like Zubat or something like that. Yeah. They start swinging at you. They bring you up to 5. It's like, all right, cool. I got 3 more CB, which is the equivalent of just countercharging the 2. But I didn't drop any hand and you didn't drop my board. And then I can start guarding after that. And then I suddenly have 5 CB to play with on my next turn.
Oh, I see. I gotcha. So you almost like got them focusing on this effect, which can derail the focus on your rear guards. Yeah. At that point. Okay, gotcha.
So you can play minions with this card or just like straight up take the counter charge. Either way, this card's really good. Plus, it helps accelerate you into the G. Yeah. So, and then my favorite pair of G Guardians in the entire deck, specifically Stiff Need. This card, I originally hated this card at first, and it quickly grew on me once I realized some of the combos you can do with this card. So on Guardian Circle, you CB any number you want, 1 or more. And then you get 5k for every face down card in your G zone. Not what you counterboss, just whatever you have face down. And if you CB 2 or more, you draw a card. And if you CB 3 or more, you draw a card. Yeah. So you can just draw 2 straight up in battle phase, which that's amazing for this deck, especially because it has so little draw power. And you'll be like, oh, well, it's so CD heavy at that point. Like, how are you going to recuperate that for the next turn? On top of Gundreed, which we just talked about, we have Unior, which is a G Guardian that everybody just forgot about, myself included. We played this in Galaxy Stargate format, but we like cut it afterwards, or some people played it, but I felt it was always kind of bad until this card came out. If you have no face-up damage, you countercharge 2 plus 5k shield, and if you have no soul charge 2 plus 5k shield. So what you can do if you have double heal trigger, especially with the Blau heal that I kind of talked about earlier, you pitch like a regular heal, go into Stiff Need, draw your 2 cards, then G-Guard again to either Unior or Gundreed, whatever you tentatively feel is going to be better for that turn or that battle. With the Blau heal, draw 2, countercharge 2, soul charge 2, and then use the Blau heal to get either an extra soul or an extra countercharge.
Wow. Yeah.
So you can just, like I said, draw 3 cards, countercharge 3, soul charge 2. Like you just do that like for no reason in this deck. And like that caught a lot of people off guard.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Because again, it's resculpting your hand during their turn, so you can either kill them next turn or just live through their turn.
Yeah. Exactly. You're just getting more pieces to work with, and you can decide what to do with them. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So that's more or less the deck. I feel that it rounds up really well. And deck's a lot of fun. I definitely recommend giving this a try if you want something a little different.
Yeah, thank you for this. And I still have like, 2 questions from this too. You answered a lot of my questions too, especially like with Scarlet, Hanali, things like that. So the first question is like, when it comes to matchups, like, did you have any trouble with like Nubatama or other clans that at first you predicted these 4, but then later on, did you feel like there were some tougher matchups?
Matchups outside, I guess, like the big 4, quote unquote. Let me think about that for a second. DP can be scary, but I don't feel that like it's kind of depend on if you just see the Sanctitude or not, or how fast you can kill them.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So DP is kind of bad. Neo Nectar can be kind of rough, depending on like when you do the Asdabulk play, because Asdabulk forces the Unterno play out from them. So it depends on how you min-max that.
If they're playing the Inez build. Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah, if they're on Inez, like Call Interno, Rain Breath, that play.
Yeah.
So Riviere, I think, unironically, is actually kind of hard. Mm-hmm. Like, as weird as that sounds, but like that again, like I know I've talked about that matchup in Houston a couple times, but I just could not break their 10-card hand at all. Like, they were just consistently sitting on 10. Like, I feel like if your deck has a ton of draw power, then it's really hard. Like, this deck going second, breaking a hand, I feel is kind of a struggle bus.
Yeah, I can see that.
As for Nuba, I didn't really test against Nubatama. I didn't know how popular it was going to be at any event, and I didn't see it the entire season, so there's that.
Wow, really?
I did not see a single Nubatama the entire season, yeah.
People like praying, like, wow, whoa. Okay.
Steam Maiden is actually kind of rough, too, just because that deck gets so much out of so little. Like, I know we only have the one in Tirana, but that deck is still really good. Like, I actually almost considered Steam Maiden for Houston over Novas, but I felt that it was still fine just to play this deck. I'm trying to think if there's, like, anything else. Grand Blue, I mean, I always just personally as a player struggle against Grand Blue. That deck just gives me nightmares. But it's probably okay. You could probably just rush down Grand Blue in a realistic case, but again, I would have to test that matchup a bit more. And I can't think of anything immediate that super scares me otherwise. I guess DI is, like, a weird one where it's like you have to watch how much CB you give them, because NLK can just kill you. So how you just try and kill them, and they have good defensive options too, but that deck is also very piece reliant. So I feel like it's similar to Naru, where it's like you're flipping a coin to see who kind of wins that one.
Yeah, I see. Gotcha. And that's fine. There's a good amount of matchups too. That's super helpful too for other people viewing this deck list too. I think the last question, and I kind of started with this and I'll end this, like, what do you think is really holding back Novas from topping a little bit more during the season that we just had?
I feel that a lot of it's a few factors. One, like I kind of said this before, but like our V era support was so low quality, and we have to rely so much on our G era support. Like, if you're not playing the Scarlet Birds and the Rollicks, you're playing at that point Malayakis and Jarahawks, which that's like the deck has so low defensive power, which in theory sounds fine for an aggro deck. But when you have to drop so many 5Ks from your hand just to like guard one swing, like it's not even guarding multiple swings, it's just guarding one, where it's so many like you commit a lot to guard a little in this deck.
Exactly.
I will say also that advantage is kind of a problem with this deck. You don't plus realistically in this deck. Like, even Scarlet Bird, which is more like an upstart goblin, it's still like you're committing a card just to draw an extra card. Zubat is one of the very few ways you actually plus in this deck, where it's like if you just end of turn draw a card, which again, that's end of turn, so you're not even getting the extra card to commit on their turn.
Yeah.
And like, as Albert put it best when we talked about this deck, it's that this main deck just struggles with like a lot of like, I want to say like actual support. Plus we haven't like gotten anything really from D era that's really been good for the deck.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
There's been like one card that I looked at, I forget the full name of it, but it's called Proteed, which is a grade 1 8K that when a rearguard is retired from one of your rearguard circles, you bind the Proteed to add that card from drop to hand.
Oh.
Which yeah, exactly. And because like that is also like one way you can play around this deck. Like if you just start swinging sides too much and Novas just run out of rearguards to call, which granted why we tried to maximize on everything being like a callable piece. But if they just eventually run out of gas, then Nova just can't recover because it doesn't plus anything and it needs other rear guards in order to trigger the cards that can potentially build you advantage. So
yeah, Aquaforce has that problem too when they're behind. Yeah. You need pieces to get pieces.
Yeah, exactly. But at least your pieces can like somewhat replace themselves and like even going to soul and draw a card. I wish we had something like that.
Oh, yeah. Fair enough with that. Yeah, too. But I understand it. I sympathize with you, brother.
Yeah. So it's just like RG. I think RG's on like straight up in the game one of the absolute best. Like we have some of the best strides. Like Buster, Merciless, Striger. Like the fact that we can still play our GB8 and not be copium about it, I think is like insane.
Oh yeah.
Vic 10 is such a good card, but it's our main deck. I feel that's just kind of the lower quality stuff.
I see. No, that makes a lot of sense too. It's the little things that over time could add up for you or against you too. Makes sense too. Thank you for even answering that too, because like, Novas are that deck that like as the game state goes longer, the worse it is for the opponent. And I feel like this deck is also has the opportunity to do well, but I can see now why that it may be short or coming up short at certain events, because it's top here and there, but not as much as that I would expect at least, right?
Yeah, like it's very hard for this deck. Like, and again, like it's I guess the other reason is again just because like the coin flip aspect, where it's like if you go second in certain matchups, you just can't break the opponent.
Yeah, you're already going at a disadvantage in those case scenarios too.
Yeah, so it's not that the deck like is bad. Like I think again, like there's a reason I picked this deck for the entire season, but you have to be aware of the matchups, and accept the fact that you are playing a deck that is in theory going to always be behind. Because other decks I feel can just plus a lot more than you can. Like you will always be behind in card advantage. Yeah, but if you can like know your strings and then realize like, hey, these two interactions do this and help me in this matchup, you in theory can blow any matchup out of the water. It's just very hard, but you have to know what you're doing.
Yeah, I agree.
Which to some people, it's like, well, why would I play a deck that requires so much thinking power when I can just play like Narukami and play the best deck of the format,
Yeah, exactly. You have to lean more on that matchup knowledge, which not everybody either has the time or is willing to put in the effort and, etc. No, I get it. Cool. Well, thanks again for hopping onto the channel. This was super helpful too. If people want to check out his channel, I'll put his links in the description too, and also his Twitter so you can follow him. And feel free to ask him questions, whether it be Novas or even just the metagame. Anything you want to say, Evan?
Thank you again very much for having me on here. It's been fun. Once again, shout outs to a couple friends just real fast for helping me throughout the entire season. Shout out to Albert for theory crafting with me on this entire list throughout the season. Shout outs to my friend Tommy for giving me Chaos Breaker matchups and stop flipping OTs, I swear to God. Shout outs to my friend Tyler or Magnus Seraph who let me crush at his place during Houston. Shout outs to people in my own Discord, the Shooting Star Satellite, along with the Added Cut Discord for giving me some play testing and theory crafting. And check me out on Twitch, IbleStarEvan, same name across all social medias that I'm on. So it's been greatly appreciated and I love being here.
Awesome. Thanks again. Until the next time, amigos. Bye.
Goodbye.